thank you to everyone who is joining our session this afternoon. This is the Small Business Playbook breakout session, Rally to Recovery, where we're going to talk to some of the people, the local business owners who are helping to shape and define what the recovery is going to look like in our communities every step of the way. So we are going to be talking to some amazing restaurant operators from different parts of the country at different stages of reopening so that we can understand what some of those challenges and lessons are at each stage of the recovery. So we are joined by Joe and Celia WardWallace. They are the owners of South LA Café. They're waving there. They opened this cafe that became a community and cultural center. Instantly, it was a success, but it opened just a few months before COVID began. And so they were forced to reinvent, rethink, and reimagine their business to sort of dive deeper into the community and dive deeper into their mission. And now they're trying to think about the next phase of their business and the next phase and evolution of South LA Café. So we're going to talk to them about where they are in that road to recovery as California starts to reopen. But then we're also going to talk to Jeff Good of Mangia Bene Restaurant Group, based out of Mississippi. He's been in business for 26 years. Mississippi is almost fully reopened, or fully reopened as the case may be. And so even though he had to start the pandemic by laying off almost all of the workforce, got a lifeline from a local grocery store that needed bread bakes, and he was able to supply that. Now your locations are reopening, and business in some locations are even better than they were before the pandemic. So we'll talk to Jeff about that. And then, of course, we've got Neil Bradley, who is Chief of Policy for the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, who will give us a bit of the lay of the land here in Washington and tell us what small businesses and local businesses want to see out of D.C. So we are just going to dive right into it. And I want to start with you guys, Joe and Celia, to talk a little bit about the ways that you've had to reinvent your business from when COVID started to what you were able to do once the pandemic hit, but also really focus on what pieces of your pandemic business model you plan to carry with you as you start to reopen your doors and try to get back to normal.
That's it? That's all you want us to talk about?
Yes, please.
In 1 minute.
You start.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Well, we opened in the last month of 2019, in December of 2019. We are from the community of South Central LA, or South LA, some people say. And so we had a huge success right when we opened our doors. Everybody was so excited. We were profitable right away. All of that pressure of the financial debt and sort of relationship strain, melted away, and we were instantly, in flow. And we had hosted 17 community events, and everything was just happening according to plan. But as they say, when you make plans, God laughs, right? And so here came COVID-19. We had to cut back, almost all of our staff. Our sales, dropped to 70 to 90% down, and we had to pivot immediately. And we had a background in business. We've been in business for like 22 years now in different arenas. And because of our crash and burns and rebuilding through those experiences, we knew we had to be nimble, we had to be quick, and we had to be intuitive in what we were going to do. So we launched an online ordering app where people could order, from their
outside
phone.
Dining.
We opened up our outside dining space. That was hugely popular. Obviously, we're in SoCal, so that helped with the beautiful weather. And then Joe had this vision of a grocery box. You want to tell them?
As I always say, it came to me in a dream. And, the next day I told her, why don't we put together this healthy vegetable box? And then she took it from there. She put it online, picked out the most useful foods for a family of four for, 4 or 5 days. And we went for it.
We created the option where you can buy it or you can sponsor a box. And we started to see 70% of sales were from people who were not even local, who were inspired. This was also around George Floyd's murder and sort of the racial reckoning that was happening, and people waking up to, how could they take more action? How could they have more impact? And so we were this easy way, let's put some money behind these two people who are on the grassroots we trust, who are doing great stuff to, you know, level the playing field in their community. And so we started getting
and also it didn't hurt being on the cover of a
the
big
LA
Times Sunday paper.
Yeah, that helped too.
That helped.
But all of that,
Media is powerful.
Yes,
yeah,
it is.
yeah. All of that to say, we started this. We started having all these boxes, and we needed to give them away. And so we started a food distribution. Started 150 boxes of food a week for the community. Now we're up to about 250 boxes.
Tomorrow is week 47.
47 weeks, over 45,000 people fed.
You do the math.
And is that going to be the business model though? As California reopens, are you going to get back to South LA Cafe as you originally envisioned it?
South LA Cafe, as we originally envisioned it, it is exactly what South LA Cafe is right now. We like to say, you know, you as a human can create the vision of what you think it's supposed to be, but you know, what the universe or God or spirit has planned for you is so much larger than you can ever imagine. And that's very clear that we were aligned to our mission and our calling. And then what has unfolded is where we're supposed to go. And we've also created a nonprofit so that we can potentially transition our food justice work and our economic development work around business incubation and workforce training into a nonprofit avenue to create resources and opportunity for the local community. I know I just said a lot and like a speed round.
Just what she said.
well, Jeff, this is so interesting because I think this applies to what I know of your experience so far, and you can share it with our audience, which is, you know, a year ago, COVID seemed like it was potentially the end of everything. And where you sit today is in a very different place, and maybe even a better place than you thought you would be pre-pandemic. Tell us about the boom in business that you've seen as the state has reopened.
Oh, thank you very much, Elon. It's a tale of two cities in many, many ways. You know, the classic, you know, feast or famine. A year ago, this has been a really weird month, the month of March, to look back and to have March 18th and March 19th come and go, because those were very, very dark days for me. And so as context, my partner and I opened our first restaurant together 27 years ago. So we're in the capital city, Jackson, Mississippi, small southern town, but the capital city, it matters. And we met in high school, and so we're that, much like Joe and Celia, we are of our community, and we for 27 years have built ourselves into that position of being community leaders. And we built out a restaurant group of 3 restaurants, and one of the restaurants has started to franchise a little bit within the state, and then all of a sudden it all stops, you know, and there's plenty of times that business stops. Jackson recently has been on the national news for our water failure. We had 18 days that we did not have water in our city. Some parts of the city up to 30 days. The water plant failed, and it just happened again the other day. But nobody knows that the water plant caught fire. Think about that for a moment. And we lost water pressure for 24 hours in the city. We had to close all of our restaurants. I'm used to a lot of problems, but I'm not used to something that is an overall shutdown. But we all went through this in various ways. So I'm not, anyone that's listening, there's nothing new to that. The experience for me personally was very traumatic. And we really have to reconcile, I think, as business people, the acknowledge, and that's why I like Joe and Celia so much, is they speak to the spirit and the God force. There is, I think, a very positive God force coming forth to help us through this. But it's really easy to get depressed and really question what the hell just happened. And so we were very, very hampered, and I had to let everybody go. We let 184 people go. We released them. We had no way to pay. We had leases that were personally guaranteed, cash flow that could take us through for a little bit, you know, the money in the bank, and then what was going to happen next. And then, like you said, a tale of two cities. So here we are a year later. I'm in a state that's fully open. I'm in a state where the mask mandate has been lifted. In my city, we have a mask mandate here, and we have been strict adherent to that philosophy from day one. A year ago, when we started baking bread, I wore a mask in the restaurant with 2 other bakers just to provide that level of safety, because that's good science. But what I do see is that in our community, the numbers are dramatically tamped down, and so we really don't have a pandemic. I'm being very, very objective about this. I read the daily counts. We're not in a pandemic mode in Mississippi. So the idea of being open seems to be working. And I've done some advocacy work. We did a community vaccination event last Wednesday at our restaurant, Broad Street, which is our community restaurant. Had the health department out, and we got a lot of my employees that were on the fence. They decided to go ahead and join us. And so that was great. So the point is, you're asking where we are. So we fully reopened our restaurants in terms of dine-in by the middle of the summer. So sometime in the June, July timeframe, we were not just outside dining and curbside and neighborhood delivery, all those things you're doing. We were back in the dining room at 50% capacity. Then in the fall, our state went to 75% capacity. My restaurants, we stayed roughly at 50% because with 6-foot spacing. That's just how all the dining rooms worked. Then in the late fall, I should say, then in the late winter, so January timeframe, February timeframe, March, at the state level, we went to 100% with no restrictions. Our city, our mayor last night made the announcement that this week he is going to release all citywide restrictions with the exception of the mask. So we are now at bar seating, community table seating, and all of those things. So how does that work as a restaurateur, where we've been dying for this moment where we can invite people back into the restaurant to be able to eat with us? I think it's really important that businesses that are in this position where you are now able to pack them in, you need to be responsible about it. And so you need to provide options for people that may not be comfortable doing that. And I think that is, you can turn a blind eye to that and say, it's just time to start ringing the register and it doesn't matter. And if you're not ready yet, forget you. But I think all folks of our community who want to come out to eat, it's important that we address that. So continuing to give options for outside eating, having areas where there's a different part of the dining room that's spaced a little differently, and being, and then takeout, just being able to address that as well. So
sounds like, a diversified dining experience.
I think so, and that's one of the tool sets we have to have, Elon. We have to have it. It is not the same. It is different. And you asked what this being better off. I think that tangibly, I think the better off part is we're all a lot better at takeout. And takeout is here to stay. And I think we're all just a lot better. I can't even imagine how Joe and Celia scaled to the amount for those food boxes. I have a little history in that myself. We did not do a good job of that when we tried to do something. So that's amazing.
Well, you guys are fortunate because you were able to make it through the past 14 months or so of the pandemic. We talked a little bit before the session formally started about the role that government aid has played in that, specifically the Paycheck Protection Program, the new Restaurant Revitalization Fund, I believe it's called. Neil, if you could just weigh in a little bit, is the money from Washington getting to Main Street, or are there bottlenecks that still need to be addressed?
Well, it has gotten to Main Street in a lot of places, but it's not universal. And none of these rescue efforts have been perfect, but they really have made the difference in the ability of a lot of small businesses to be able to survive. And so, I think when we look back on this period and this year, we will count the Paycheck Protection Program round 1 and PPP round 2 as pretty overwhelming successes for something that the government stood up in a matter of weeks. And now when we think about listening to Jeff and Joe and Celia talking about kind of some of the last businesses that come back, and we know that in a pandemic, the last businesses that are really able to reopen fully are those where, as Jeff said, you pack the people in, right? Because that's the most dangerous aspect of the pandemic. And so the last lifelines that Washington's provided, the live event grant program, which really went live last week, just yesterday, the restaurant revitalization program. People are already getting their approvals through that program. That's what's going to see us to the other side of this, hopefully sometime this summer as we head into the fall. And I think we're going to look back and count all these businesses that are still open, still operating, and most importantly, contributing to their community the way that these two businesses are.
One of the things that we keep hearing from small businesses is that they're really dealing with a worker crunch as the economy starts to reopen. Open it up to Jeff or Joe and Celia. How are you guys dealing with finding the employees and finding the people that you might need as business starts to pick back up?
I'll address that. It's been hard. I'm going to be honest with you, to get good, solid people during this time, and it's harder than it was before. And I understand it a little because people are concerned about working in our cafe and being exposed to the public as much as they are. They're deciding to not necessarily go back to work full time or take as many hours as we need, because we're on a up and we need to hire right away, and we're aggressively going after that now.
Yeah,
So,
I think that also we have a commitment to hire local people.
Right.
Also, we're open to previous incarcerated folks. We're really looking at all the different intersectionality aspects and trying to make sure that we have proper representation and that our staff reflects the community in which we reside. And, all of these sort of conscious business, racial equity practices are very important to us. And so trying to make sure what we're doing is aligned with all of that, as well as, you bring in people, therefore, that may be an entry-level person because of, their lack of experience.
Right.
And then you have to put the additional time in to make sure that they're properly trained, and, versus somebody who's maybe come from a more affluent or more highly resourced community where they've gotten, to work at X, Y, and Z fancy coffee shop, where they can just come in and like take over the reins.
it's who we need. But
we need that level of experience.
Right.
But part of what we're doing, and we've referenced a few times our foundation, which is the South LA Community Foundation. Part of the reason why that was, again, sort of a download we received in 2020 to create this foundation was because we were just, a lot of the inequities that exist within our society, I think for everybody, right, were illuminated in 2020 on a level that we haven't seen since maybe the civil rights movement. And so for us, that's part of our heritage. My parents are full-time civil rights organizers, so I very much grew up in that ethos.
she had a picket sign at 2.
Yeah, I grew up with the picket sign.
Right.
But all of that to say, trying to find people that sort of check the boxes on what our culture and our values are aligned with, and then helping to get them up to speed on skill set and all of that are things that we're working hard on.
It's hard. That's all I'm going to say about that. But
Yeah.
If it was easy, everyone would do it, right?
Right.
So
Everyone would have amazing coffee if it was easy. Jeff, I want to ask you too, before we run out of time here, about because it's not just employees that have been tough to come by during this time, but also supplies, prices we're starting to see for ingredients, for lumber, things you need to sort of build out your restaurant. Those are going up as well. How are you guys managing perhaps an increase in cost as well?
Thank you for asking. And this becomes, I think, also a question of scale. So we are fortunate enough that we, over the years, have entered into a series of some buying contracts and preferred pricing, and we have volume discounts because we have the volume of the 3 restaurants, and we pay our bills on time, which is the number one thing I can always give to any budding entrepreneur is pay your bills on time. That gives you power. And if you can't pay your bills, communicate, because that gives you grace. So you need to do those things. But we are seeing, we've gone through the process of seeing dairy go up, and then meat go up, and then pork go up, and then right now there's a catch-up crisis. So get your catch-up now, because it's coming. I think that things are going to continue to be fluid. And I was reading an article over the weekend about that the Fed seems to think that a lot of this stuff is not structural. It's going to be in and out. Quite frankly, I took economics in college. I was a business major, and I have an appreciation for economics. But it's funny that now I'm a little more attuned to that because of the reality when it hits when you see the invoices and you find out ice cream is this much.
Yeah, Jeff, are you going to have to pass those costs on to your consumers?
So I mean, that's one of the biggest issues about the retail industry. It's the dollar in, dollar out. And restaurants, the famous last words about the restaurant business is, hey, do you want to make $1 million in the restaurant business? Start with 2. It is a business of tiny margins, and so when all of a sudden everything goes up, what do you do? But at the same time, you have the reality that you're competing in a marketplace against other restaurants, against home meal replacement, and against grocery stores.
The landscape has gotten so competitive during the pandemic, but you guys are clearly among the survivors, and I have no doubt that you'll have continued success in the future. We wish you guys all the best. Neil, thank you so much for joining us as well and giving us a little bit of an inside look at what's happening in Washington. I'm going to let you guys go so that everybody can join back into the main stage or to the next session. But thank you again so much for your time, and thank you to everybody for watching this breakout session. Thanks, guys.
It's been an absolute joy. Thank you.